They said he must stay with them for a while at any rate until his arms and legs were quite well again, and he was welcome to stay even longer if he were not expected back with the circus immediately. David did not really know what he would rather do. He wanted to go, but at the same time he wanted to stay to learn all he could about the house. He looked up intently at the children's father and mother. They were both smiling. "Can I go now, this very moment, if I want to?" The children's father stopped smiling and looked disappointed. "Yes, of course, David, if that's what you'd rather do, but we should all be very glad if you would stay with us a while so we could show you how grateful we are." David considered. If only it were not too dangerous, he would like to stay with them a little and learn more about their way of life. "If I can go whenever I want to, then I'd like to stay a bit," he said at length. "Yes, thank you. I don't have to join the circus just yet. But please don't be so grateful, for you see I wanted to rescue the little girl from the fire, and you've already thanked me." "Yes, but we shall continue to be grateful to you as long as we live, David. It's something we shall never forget," the children's father said. David felt very, very tired that evening. He went to sleep in that soft bed, and yet it was a long time before he fell asleep. So excited was he with all that he had seen that day. He could not remember the half of it. There was no room in his head for so many new things at once, but he did remember the food. Never would he forget what it was like to eat in such a house. It was almost like listening to music. Johannes had once told him about it, and when he saw it, he remembered. One of the prisoners had made some remark about eating like pigs, and so David had asked if people ate differently outside the camp. But he'd never been able to picture what it was like, and now he had seen for himself. You sat at a table with a cloth, so white that it gleamed, and there were plates, one for each person, with flowers painted on them, and candlesticks, with candles in them, and flowers in a bowl. Oh, and the glasses you drank from were fine and delicate and tinkled if you happened to touch them with a knife or a fork. And the knives and forks and spoons were all of silver, and everyone had his own, as well as a napkin to wipe his fingers on should they become greasy. David was afraid he would not know how to eat properly, but he watched the children's father and mother first and then did how they did. It was lucky he was used to being careful in his movements, for otherwise he would certainly have spilled something. And there was more food than you could possibly eat at one time. All different kinds of things, and everything tasted wonderful. David dared not eat very much, for he knew the rich food might make him ill since he was not used to it. But to think of eating something beautiful, well, if that's how the prisoners in the concentration camps had been in the habit of eating before they were taken prisoner, he could well understand why they said they ate like pigs here. The food was all brought in by servants and cleared away before the next course arrived, and you were given clean plates and knives. And the children said they ate like that every day, and several times a day. The next day he would enjoy it all again. Chapter 5. David thought of living in a house, and it was very difficult. It was not the house itself, because that was lovely to be in, but the people. They constantly seemed to expect him to say and do things he would never have thought of, and what appeared to be sensible and natural to him seemed to surprise them. Otherwise, being in a house was lovely, quite wonderful. David contemplated the 2 words with satisfaction, repeating them several times to himself. He had been in the house many days now, and was learning all the time. He had learned, for example, to use those 2 words. They meant something that was good. It was satisfying to know several words for the same thing, for he could describe exactly to what degree a thing was good. It was just the same with the word beautiful. You could divide it into 3. If something were only a little beautiful, it were nice. If it were more beautiful, you said lovely, and finally, beautiful. Being able to use words properly was a great advantage, for the more words you knew the meaning of, the better you could think. And besides, people were not surprised at what you said if you used the right words. The children's mother had laughed when he saw the bathroom, and said It was beautiful and good. He should have said lovely. He would always remember the bathroom with its gleaming pale green bath and all that clean, clear water that came out when you turned the tap. You could have as much hot water as you liked and sit in it right up to your neck. And there was soap, large pieces of it that smelled so much better than the 2 cakes he'd bought himself. It rubbed into a beautiful soft lather that made you quite clean. And when you had finished, there were large, soft, clean towels to dry yourself on. And there were little sticks to clean your nails with, and you could brush your teeth. David had never tried that before, and the first time it made his mouth sore doing it. But it was wonderful to be so clean. There were books in that house too, not just one, but many. When he first arrived, the children's father had asked him if there was anything he particularly wanted. David had considered carefully and then said, "I think most of all I'd like a book to read." He wanted to hear music again too, but the book was more important. He said it must be a book published before 1917. The children's father had smiled and asked why, but David had not dared to tell him because he wanted to be sure that it was true and not something that they had made up. The meals in the house had delighted him, both because there was so much to eat and it all tasted so good, and even more because the table looked so beautiful with the glasses and with the silver and the white cloth and with fine plates for everybody. But people he found difficult. They seemed to have no idea of what was good. The children's mother was quite pleased that he liked the bathroom, but the children themselves hated it. At least the boys did. Perhaps he was wrong. No matter how hard he tried, he could not help himself liking it. He had nothing against being dirty. You got dirty in the course of the day. You just couldn't avoid it. But to be free to wash the dirt off whenever you wanted to, yes, that was wonderful. And yet the children did not seem to understand that, and he dared not tell them how disgusting it was when men who had been clean with shiny hair and clean teeth that grew so matted and ingrained with dirt that everything about them smelt repulsive and looked loathsome. For if he told them that, then of course they might discover where he came from, and then they would be obliged to send for them. The children could not understand either why he was so anxious to read books. They always wanted him to go out with them, although he longed to be left alone and sit and read the books. There was no end to what you could learn from books if only you had enough time. He could read more rapidly now, but not really quickly. He first had to choose his books. If only he could read all of them, but David knew he had not very much time. He must continue on before the winter came. And so it was important for him to read books wherever he could find information that might be useful to him. It was because of the books that he'd already stayed there for so many days. The people, the children especially, made him nervous, and he hated being in the same place with Carlo. The house he could leave, though, not without regret. He had learned that he could never become an ordinary boy. The knowledge was quite painful, but there was no point in deceiving himself. He would like to have learned to have been a proper boy, to be a boy as they should outside the concentration camp. And yet, children are so stupid. David did not understand them at all. He did not understand why they didn't like washing. He did not understand why they preferred to live without knowing anything. They did not seem to think it was necessary, as if there was no difference between a donkey and a human being. Now, David was very fond of donkeys. They were, he sought for the right word, nice. But it was very much better to be a human being able to learn things.